let me say good morning and welcome to you, Your Excellency. First time to the national radio.
Yes, good morning to you. This is the first time I've had the privilege of being invited by you.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much. So how has it been so far? How's the mission going so far?
Well, so far so good. Just before we were preparing to hand over the responsibilities for the security sector to the government of Liberia, I had been told by many people around Liberia, both within the government and outside, that they were very nervous and they were very concerned about the state of stability after the handover of responsibilities. Now, we have gone beyond 1 month since we handed over all facets of responsibility to the institutions of Liberia, and the sky hasn't fallen down.
Okay.
So that's good news for us, and let's keep it that way.
Okay, so that's the voice of the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations Mission in Liberia, His Excellency Farid Zarif. He's our special studio guest this morning. I particularly extended him an invitation to coming here to throw some light on the drawdown and post activities of the United Nations Mission and their continued engagement with the Liberian government and the Liberian people. So we'll start off our discussion, piggybacking on your comments. The sky hasn't fallen. It means that security is all well. Your reading so far, how are our security agencies responding to the new challenge of taking over? Because UNMIL has been here for the last 12 years. So how are they responding from your own readings?
I must compliment both the leadership of the government of Liberia, as well as all the rank and file officers and soldiers and police officers of the security institutions of the Liberian government. They have so far shown a good sign of the competent and the professional performance throughout Liberia. Yesterday I was in Harper, where I informed the authorities and the leaders of the security institutions of our plans to wrap up and close our base in Harper. And that I see as a sign of confidence that the people and the Liberian government have in themselves in order to take over all facets of life, particularly in connection with security, in their own hands. That's very important. If we compare the situation between 2003, when the mission was first deployed to Liberia, and what we are seeing today, there is a big, significant difference. At that time, we didn't really have much to speak of in terms of the government institutions and security structures. Now, not only we have stronger, more trained and more equipped and more numerous security forces, but the mindset is also gradually changing in the direction of really trying to deliver on the services that the people of Liberia expect of those institutions. And that's more important, in my opinion, than the numbers, than the equipment and stuff. Because these institutions have been created in order to serve the interests of the people of Liberia, in order to provide safety and security for them. And if that mindset becomes the main driver of the activities of these institutions, then I'm sure that the level of trust and confidence that the people of Liberia would be investing in these institutions would also be enhanced. It's very important for the people to know that these institutions are their own, and they're the ones who are paying for the salaries, for the cost of sustaining these institutions, so they should share the responsibility of providing safety and security to their own communities by supporting the police and other institutions of security. I'm very confident that with the enhanced capacity that now exists within the security institutions of Liberia and with the cooperation of the people of Liberia throughout the country, we will see the continuation of a state of stability and consolidation of peace in Liberia.
Let me also say that this interview is being read live on the United Nations Mission Radio, UNMIL Radio. So we'd like to acknowledge UNMIL Radio for doing that, to ensure that Liberia listens to the SRSG. There were supposed to be certain benchmarks made by security institutions as a part of the drawdown plan before the 30th June deadline. In terms of, I know reading through your report to the Security Council, some of the things were in met then. Are they continuing, or is it going to be just, well, we didn't meet it, so well, we're not going to continue to meet those benchmarks? Are you working along with the Liberian authorities to ensure that those benchmarks are met?
No, absolutely. As you know, the security transition plan covers a period of 3 years. Some of the activities were supposed to be achieved, carried out right at the beginning of the launch of the plan. But some others are processes that have commenced, and some of them will be completed within, let's say, a few months, some others within a year, and it would take up to 3 years for all of these bits and pieces of the plan to be put in place. The level of implementation is satisfactory. We are behind in certain areas, but these are not very critical. And let's also be realistic. There have been some factors that inhibited greater progress because of the lack of resources and some other dynamics. We are working very closely with the government of Liberia to make sure that those factors do not frustrate the process, and we continue working towards achieving all the benchmarks that we have set and the government of Liberia have set for themselves.
Let's leave it security for a bit and move to the justice and rule of law issues. There were some key legislations that should have been passed, especially in terms of reforming some of the security institutions to be able to play certain kinds of role now that UNMIL has turned over. How far, to your knowledge, has these gone, or are you're satisfied that, or not satisfied that some of these things are still lurking in the corridors of the national legislature?
As always, I would like to be very frank about my views of the situation. There were 3 key pieces of legislation proposed by the government of Liberia related to security sector. The one on small arms and ammunition control, the other one related to BIN, and the third one related to police. We were hoping that action will be taken very swiftly in the legislature with regards to all these 3 instruments. But unfortunately it took tremendous amount of time in order to sort out the differences that existed both within the legislature and between the legislature and the government of Liberia. After so many months of wrangling and back and forth, now we have the 3 pieces approved through the legislature. However, in 2 cases, the changes that have been brought into the legislature have gone beyond what the intention of the government of Liberia has been. The government has now completed the process of legislation and enactment of the law on small arms and ammunition. So that has become a law. While in the case of the BIN law and the police law, there are certain changes that have been brought into the draft that was proposed by the government of Liberia that needs a little bit of more probing, and now discussions are going on between the executive and the legislature in order to hammer out those differences, and hopefully we'll see the enactment of these 2
What are those changes that you're talking about, and how does it impact on the good intention of the previous legislation?
Yeah, some of them were probably semantic changes, which will not really cause much of a problem, but some others altered the structures that were proposed by the government. I'm not privy to some of the discussions about the areas of contention, but I understand that both the government and the legislature are now engaged in order to sort out those differences. Hopefully we'll soon see both of these other laws also promulgated effectively.
As the special representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations, you engage with the Liberian government every now and then, meeting Her Excellency the President. How is that relationship?
That relationship is and has to be based on mutual trust. And I'm very, very delighted to inform you and also the general public, the people of Liberia, of the existence of very cordial, very trusting relationship and mutually supportive communication between Her Excellency the President of Liberia, Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and myself. If I cannot be of help and support to the government and people of Liberia, then I would be failing in my duties. And that fact is known also to the government. They know that our presence on behalf of the international community is meant to support the government and people of Liberia to consolidate their gains and to move forward to the point that they would no longer need to rely on the support and assistance of the international community. We talk to each other, we exchange notes, and we find areas where the UN can support the government of Liberia and making further progress on their vision.
Are there areas of contentions when you engage with Her Excellency?
Well, certainly there are differences of opinion on how some of the issues may be handled and hammered out, particularly in connection with the timelines of action on some of the issues. But we always go not only with some just suggestions of their ideas, but also with some packages of support that would enable the government to move faster on some of these items. One area of worthy of mention is further progress on reconciliation in the country and action on constitutional reform. I've been in touch not only with the leadership of Liberia in the executive branch, but also with members of the members of the legislature as well as of the judiciary to make sure that all the necessary steps are taken towards effectively bringing about national reconciliation in the country, creating a situation where the concept of oneness of the nation is further strengthened, so everybody who lives in Liberia feels as a stakeholder in matters of the country. The Land Rights Act is one key element where we would like to see progress. The President, who is a visionary in her right, not only for Liberia but for the entire world, has proposed a series of legislative measures that would create the normative, the legal framework for advancing the country beyond the point where it has been so far, and also doing away with some of the key drivers of the conflict. And as you know, the issue of land and ownership of land in Liberia has been a big issue of contention, and oftentimes being the driving force behind violence and disputes in the country, and largely responsible also for the 2 rounds of the civil war. Now, the proposal that the President has is to have the Land Rights Act adopted so the tribal people, people living in the outer land, would also have the opportunity of possessing a piece of this country that they call home, they call their own country. That will strengthen the essence of the relationship between the man and the country. And if the legislature takes quick action on the adoption of the law on the land, then you would see consolidation of national unity taking it totally in a fundamentally new form and substance. People would really feel having been brought into the fold, having given an opportunity to share in the wealth of the country, having been given a space to work for themselves and for their communities and eventually for the whole of Liberia, to become more productive when they have the ownership of the land.
Have you engaged with the leadership of the national legislature to put forth this talk about, because it's about consolidation of the peace?
Absolutely. I have spoken to the leadership of both the House and of the Senate, and I've also spoken individually with some key movers and shakers in both chambers. And I hope that soon they will be able to sit down and discuss practical steps towards making progress on this law. This is very, very important. I cannot overemphasize the significance of adoption of this law for the future stability and peace in Liberia.
Is the UN keen about this constitution reform process that was initiated? Do you think it's possible to have a constitutional referendum before general and presidential elections?
There are 2 things. One is the substance of the proposal, the other one is the timelines for action. On the substance of the proposals, not everything that has been proposed is really in conformity with international law or with the best interests of the Liberians, in my humble opinion.
Example?
You know, when we,
Christianity and Christianizing the state would be one.
let me be more general. Anything that would divide the nation further is not going to serve the nation. Liberia has been divided for a long time because of many, many factors. Historical facts, the issue of ownership and the marginalization and all that stuff. Unless we try to work towards bringing a sense of unity around the concept of nation, so everybody would really feel as an owner of the country, then you wouldn't have really the concept of a nation consolidated. So anything that divides the nation further along different lines, be it language, be it ethnicity, be it regionalism or religion, then you are going in the wrong direction. So let's focus on things that are common amongst all members of the Liberian society. And that becomes foundation for feeling oneness rather than dividing them along different lines and then creating further wedges between segments of the population.
Timeline.
Of timeline, I believe that we should not really confuse the public during the elections. Let the elections pass, and then once the new government has taken hold of the power and has established itself, then there would be enough resources and time to go ahead and organize the referendum. Having the two of them together will probably be a major constraint on both the resources that are available and probably bring some contentious issues into the debate that may not be healthy for maintenance of stability in the country.
In terms of reconciliation, you mentioned earlier, what specifically do you want to see? What kind of progress you want to see, visible progress you want to see made?
Well, one is the issue of probably delegation of the powers of the state institutions to the people. Instead of having the president deciding on who should be the superintendents of the counties, let the people decide on that, because that will create a semblance of accountability before the people. If a superintendent knows that it is the people who is going to vote them into office, then they will become more responsible because they will be up for another election and they would want to serve the people. So if they're elected, I believe the element of accountability and responsibility will be strengthened towards the people. But now, since they're being appointed by the president of the country, they don't really feel that much obliged, unless they're very patriotic. Then the question of transparency and accountability would not be that significant.
I'm constrained to ask, there are a school of thought still in this country that believes that justice has not taken place yet in terms of consolidating the reconciliatory process of our nation, the healing process of our nation. With respect to the recommendations of the TRC and the way forward in terms of how do we find that common niche to move on from the ugly past of our nation, what has been the engagement with the leading authorities of the country? What's the thinking of our international partners and friends like you?
Well, the justice sector in general leaves a whole lot to be desired. We really need to invest heavily in order to improve the quality and the performance of the justice sector across the board. But in the context of transitional justice that relates to reconciliation, you're absolutely right. There is this pervasive feeling in many corners of the Liberian society that justice related to atrocities committed during the Civil War have not really been given adequate attention. I do share that opinion to a large extent. But justice does not necessarily mean going after the names and faces who were actually responsible for some of these atrocities. There would be very few people who would say that I had nothing to do with the war. Some people were involved in actual fighting and killing and looting and burning and raping, and some others probably were not directly involved, but then they were the ones who provoked, abetted, supported the atrocities during the war. So everybody has, not everybody, but quite a large number of people will have a share of responsibility. So it's not just about bringing people to trial and putting them behind the bars or punishing them otherwise. It is also about compensating for the loss of those people who have suffered as a result of these atrocities. Some have lost a loved one in their family. Some people have had their properties burned or looted. Some have been raped. Some have been forced out of their domicile and forced into displacement. So some measure of compensation would bring a little bit of closure to the pain and to the suffering and agony that many people have experienced. Maybe some thought should be given there to this aspect of justice. In addition to that, the concept of truth and reconciliation that was advanced at the beginning has not really gained real momentum. We can reinvest ourselves in that and see that if some of these people who were named as perpetrator of violence and war crimes are brought to a forum where they would admit their guilt and they would offer an apology both to the nation as well as to those who have been the victims of their activities. That will also give a lot of satisfaction to those who have been aggressed and who have been aggrieved.
Okay, well, you're listening to the Secretary, the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations Mission in Liberia, His Excellency Farid Zarif. He's my special studio guest this morning on ELBC Radio, wherever you're listening across the country, and also on UNMIL Radio. We have the privilege of having you this morning with us. You recently evoked, a discussion about Liberia looking at itself in terms of the way the governance issues, in terms of how do we handle the use of public resources, corruption, to put it bluntly. What was your thinking of all of this?
Well, corruption is a phenomenon that's evident in many countries around the world, from the most advanced to the least developed.
Yeah.
So Liberia is not an exception to that. Why do I talk about Liberia? Only because it's my turf. It's the area where I'm responsible for. So it would be irrelevant if I spoke about corruption in other countries. That's why the two come together, because of my responsibilities and functions. The president has taken very strong steps towards tackling this phenomena. She has come out very strongly against the phenomena having been noticed, seen across the length and breadth of the government institutions as well as outside. And we have seen evidence of very strong steps taken by the president and by institutions of Liberia to bring the accused also to justice. Of a few cases that are in progress, they're either being investigated or they're in the stage of trial. So we see some important action taken, particularly with regards to high-profile personalities. But then there are other cases of corruption which are of small scale but affect ordinary people, like small bribes that are collected from the ordinary members of the population. This is a phenomenon that is really like a scourge. It is going to reduce the level of respect for the institutions of the government. It is going to have an impact on fairness and justice within the institutions. If you get what you want through offering a bribe, then probably what you get is not your right, and it comes at a violation of either other people's rights, or it comes at a cost to the public in general, to the state interest in general. So we have to really strengthen our fight against this phenomena, and that's in line with the aspirations of the leadership of this country, particularly Madam President, and it's in line with the expectation and hope of all people of Liberia.
Which areas do you think we need to put more emphasis? Because the institutions, the anti-graft institutions and legislations are now in place.
Yeah.
Which areas do you think will still need
Well,
to?
first of all, I think it should be the people who should decide that they're not going to bribe their way into attaining something.
Okay.
If you
the
don't,
mindset, or the mindset.
you just have to refuse to give any bribes. So that's the beginning of it, and then help also the institutions with providing information on who is forcing them to pay. So the institutions will learn about it. But then across the board, you'll have to strengthen each step of the process. The police will have to have a better capacity to investigate it. The prosecutors will also have to be more trained and incapacitated in order to put together a case that will be sustained in the court. The justice sector, the judges will also have to be pious and professional and also knowledgeable of the area, so they will be able to successfully try a case and get conviction for the perpetrators of this abominable practice. So you need to really look across the whole spectrum of actors, from the people to those who sit in judgment about such matters, to remain committed to fighting against in order to achieve the desired results.
We've been 12 years now of sustained peace in our country and going on to the next round of successive elections. Who are our international friends through the United Nations mechanism? Are you satisfied with the quality of the politics, the internal politics of the country, the way we do business, the way we interact?
Well, this satisfaction is a big word.
Oh, are you pleased or what? Oh,
No, I can tell you very confidently that whoever in this country is in charge of the affairs, from the president to a normal functionary, none of them would claim that things that are happening in Liberia are fully satisfactory. There is always a room for improvement. In Liberia, I think there is a whole lot of room for improvement.
Okay.
And that's why we still remain very much on the task. We have our sleeves rolled up, and that's why the government and civil society organizations, the media, the opposition political parties, and the international supporters of Liberia, they're all very actively involved in addressing the gaps that still exist that would bring us closer to the level of satisfaction. It's a process. A lot of good things have happened so far, and we should be proud of those accomplishments on behalf of the people of Liberia and on behalf of the international community who have supported all these changes. However, when you look at the rest of the steps that need to be taken and the rest of the areas that need to be addressed, you will see that the task is humongous. It's still huge, and that's why we have to remain very much engaged and seized of the remainder of the responsibilities. Liberia is still a least developed country. Liberia is still partially dependent on international and foreign help and assistance. It is not exceptional to Liberia. However, the sooner we could reduce that level of dependency, the sooner we create capacity within Liberia to support itself and rely on itself, the better for everybody. And I think we are in that direction, moving in that direction. Hopefully the process would get further accelerated as soon the remnants of the impacts of Ebola are addressed, as well as there is an uptick in the price of the Liberia's extractive commodities. The level of income of the government would be increased, and its ability to more effectively invest itself in addressing those issues would also increase.
Political tolerance, the opposition, and its engagement with the government. What are your thoughts?
I think all those areas would need further work. There have been some progress. As you mentioned, during the past 13 years, we haven't had any wars, but then we need to consolidate it into real peace. And real peace means that the foundations for sustaining stability and calm are strengthened. We have to work towards that. Otherwise, having no wars does not necessarily mean peace. We have to remove the drivers of conflict here. We have to do away with the social marginalization. We have to create job opportunities, education opportunities for the people. We'll have to strengthen the health sector system. We'll have to create room, space for participation of all segments of the Liberian society in politics, in power sharing, in wealth sharing. Those are the key investments that we have to make in order to bring about a state where peace sustains itself, because there is no reason for peace to crumble down. There would be no reason for conflict to erupt if we consolidate those things.
There have been flashpoints from time to time between the opposition and the government. How have you been engaged a certain level to ensure stability, to ensure sobriety on all sides of the divide, if you were.
Well, that's the nature of politics, that there would be differences of opinion between those who are in power, those who want
Because
to replace them.
sometimes, and I'm choosing my words carefully. Sometimes there have been outlandish and irresponsible comments about the government.
I don't disagree with you on that. I don't disagree with you, and in fact, that has been part of my narrative when I talk to the opposition political parties, to tell them that it is your constitutional right, it is your legal right to speak up and express your views, and we will be the first to support you in the exercise of that right. But at the same time, don't forget that that right comes together with a responsibility. You can't just go around and accuse people in the government of activities that you yourself know is not correct. And if you knowingly make allegations that are equal to character assassination, and has an element of malice in it, then you're violating the law in the name of exercising your right. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable in Liberia. It's not acceptable anywhere in the world. You exercise your right to freedom of opinion, freedom of speech, but then remain within the law. Don't make irresponsible allegations for which you don't have any evidence to support. At the same time, we have been telling the government that they have to respect the right of the people to have a different opinion from them, and their right to also compete with the government in order to replace the government. However, everybody should play within the law. We keep an eye on it, and we have tried to facilitate not rapprochement, but the conflicting of some of these situations. And I'm delighted that even in the opposition parties, people defer to the United Nations in its judgment and take our counsel and advice. And hopefully we have reduced potential for situations that would be fraught with violence.
Let's move on to pending elections in the next 12 months, 13, 14 months to come. How engaged, how are you looking at it, and what would be the United Nations engagement in the entire process? Because you're drawing down now, you're leaving, you're sort of cutting this umbilical cord now and allowing the baby itself to fend for itself. So what would be your level of engagement?
I know we're far away from cutting the umbilical cord. We are just drawing down. We are just adjusting our structures to the remainder of the task on our mandate sheet. But then elections, yes, it's a very, very important, critical phase in the maturity process of Liberia's democracy after the 2 rounds of the Civil War. And we pay a whole lot of attention to that. We are doing our utmost best in order to support the government of Liberia in the relevant institutions that are handling the organization of elections in order to discharge their responsibilities in a competent and professional manner that would give confidence to the opposition political parties that the process is sort of impartial, fair, and free. I had a good meeting the beginning of this week with leadership of all 23 political parties, and the issue of election was a key topic of our discussion. We can still feel that there is a little bit of, let's say, concern about the impartiality of the NEC, the National Elections Commission. It is probably more perception than reality, but then we are encouraging NEC and everybody else to strengthen their communication with all the opposition parties and engage them very actively with a view to addressing those elements that are still causing concern to the opposition political parties. We have to make sure that the government or the ruling party is not seen as if they're taking advantage of their position in power to change matters in their own interest or to work against the interests of other political parties. By greater communication, some of the remaining perceptions about partiality in the Elections Commission or about the whole system will probably be addressed to a great extent. But enhancing observation and monitoring of the elections is probably another way of giving assurance to everybody that the elections are carried out in conformity with the law. The United Nations stands ready to support the Elections Commission in order to enhance its professional capacity to do the job as professionally as possible, and also to work with the opposition political parties, with civil society organizations, with the media, and other actors in order to also prepare them for close observation and monitoring of the elections that would then enhance the quality and credibility of the elections come October of 2017.
We got 15 minutes to go. We're talking with the special representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations. Your Excellency, I want to open the lines for 5 minutes to get the public to engage with you. So let's do that. 0880-514-096, and the other number is
0776 089713.
Do we have a call on the line now? Not yet. But let me say that when we come back from taking calls, we'll talk about the future of the mission, the very next steps. There are some important dates coming up in the mission. We'll talk about that, and then finally we'll close on that. So good morning to you, caller. Yes, Your Excellency is listening. Okay, go ahead.
Calling from Bomb County.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
I want to appreciate the pressure the President of the Secretary General in Liberia. Well, I appreciate the level of exposure and the peace that we have had in Liberia for the past 30 years. But I have this comment on the referendum, and also
The line is. I think we have to cut him off because the line is so terrible. Let's try another caller. If we have a. Okay.
for referendum. Also make a comment that it is not right, I believe the president appoint superintendent or county citizens with a point. So what do you make of that?
Okay. You took that down. Did you get him? I think he was talking about your comments about the referendum, the timing of the referendum, and then the elections of superintendent. I think he wants you to clarify more what you mean by that.
With pleasure. It's just an opinion. These matters will be decided by the people of Liberia and by the institutions of the state, the legislature, the executive. In my personal opinion, combining two major exercises like elections with another major exercise that's a referendum would be a humongous, huge logistics challenge. In addition to that, the issues that will be discussed in the context of the elections may not necessarily be exactly those issues that are going to be subject of discussion and debate in the context of the referendum. Now, combining the two, particularly issues related to the referendum being contentious, as we have already seen in public debates, would cause a very heightened level of tension during the elections, and the elections and its quality will be probably marred and adversely affected by having the two debates taken up together. And it may also impact on the positions that the candidates will take during those elections. They will be probably more influenced by the elements of the constitutional amendments, proposed constitutional amendments, rather than the issues that are normally debated during an election cycle. So both of these reasons would lead us into thinking that it will serve the interests of Liberia to put the elections behind ourselves and then calmly move in the direction of having a quality debate on the issues related to the referendum, and then hold the referendum for the proposed amendments.
Okay, but let's go on to winding down our discussion, looking at the future of the mission here in Liberia. June 30 has come and gone. There's a general perception in Monrovia and perhaps across the country when people see the United Nations peacekeeping troops departing, is that, oh well, UNMIL is about to leave. Where are we at this stage of the peacekeeping mission?
Well, it would be presumptuous to even think of a timeline as to when the mission will be leaving, because that's a decision that's firmly in the hands of members of the Security Council. For now, we are going to retain 1,240 strong military force as well as 606 police force on the ground, together with the civilian component, international and national staff that we have. And of course, in addition to that, are the gamut of the entire United Nations agencies, funds and programs who will continue operating. At the end of this month, on the 31st of August, there will be a multi-departmental team coming from New York, a large one, 18-person team headed by an ASG, Assistant Secretary General, who will stay here for about 10 days in Liberia, and they will talk to people in the government from top to down. They'll talk to the security institutions, they will talk to the diplomatic community, they'll talk to the opposition parties, they'll speak with the media, they'll speak with the civil society organizations, they'll go around Liberia, visit different counties in order to obtain a very comprehensive and deep knowledge of the prevailing conditions, and to also look into the prospects of future evolution of these processes. And then after having understood thoroughly the situation, they'll come up with an analysis of the security and other dynamics in the country, and based on that will propose to the Secretary General some options for the way forward. In the middle of November, the Secretary General is going to send his own report to the Security Council, making certain recommendations about the future of this mission. The Council is meeting at the end of the year, in December, and at that point in time they will look at this comprehensive assessment as well as the recommendations of the Secretary General and make a very informed decision which way to go. My feeling is that no member of the Council would want to have the UN cut and run from Liberia, because we have invested ourselves for the past 13 years. Only the amount of money spent on having the mission here is almost $8 billion.
Wow.
We're talking about $8,000 million. Huh? That's a large amount of money. You don't want to risk the loss of that investment. They will be very cautious to make sure that when the mission goes into further drawdown, there would be adequate capacity retained to give us assurance that the Liberians are not going to be left alone in dealings with some of the potential developments that would be beyond their capacity to deal. I have the confidence that while there would be further downsizing of the mission, or maybe even change of the mission and its structure, the Security Council and the international community at large will still remain engaged with Liberia in one form or another. And the nature of that engagement would depend on the assessment that they would make of the situation. So we will be here with our different capacities, boots on the ground, or alternatively soft power, for the long haul with you.
Okay.
We are not going to leave you alone. So our agencies, funds and programs will still be around and continue providing capacity building and other support to Liberia.
As we take leave of you, what do you want to leave for Liberians this Friday?
I think the most important thing for any nation, anywhere in the world, is maintaining their unity. And for maintaining unity, they have to cling on to the features of their oneness that keeps them together. They have to make sure that nothing comes in that would divide them further. If it is maintaining the sovereignty of the nation, then let's get together around that concept. Remember the days of Ebola?
Yeah.
It became a unique threat that threatened everybody across Liberia, regardless of their race, their creed, their color, their religion, their language. And the nation came together. And they fought against it, and they succeeded in defeating that scourge. It was a huge, huge enemy that the Liberians managed to defeat once they got their hands together and they worked together in order to defeat it. The same goes with regards to the unity of the nation. Keeping the unity of the nation requires every member of the nation to work together. And finding commonalities is the way to go. Instead of focusing on the separate elements of the mosaic that creates the nation, let's keep your eyes focused on the large picture and focus on maintaining that commonality. So that's my key message.
Your Excellency, it has been a privilege and I'm most grateful. Thank you for taking up our invitation.
My pleasure, and then thank you for the opportunity, and my best wishes to you, to your colleagues in the radio, as well as to all the people of Liberia whom we have come here to serve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Listeners, on that note, this is how we come to the end of this edition of the Super Morning Show on ELBC Radio. Thanks to UNMIL for relaying this special interview with His Excellency, the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations Mission in Liberia. Ledger Hudrani is my name. When I talk to you, will be next time, Friday, same time, same station. All the best.